the great white north, we the north, the land of maple syrup, lumberjack country, and oh yes, the 51st state. What am I talking about? I'm talking about my country. These are all nicknames from my glorious Canada. Hi, I'm Dora, and welcome to another new and fantastic episode of Bite Size English, your daily bite of English. In today's episode, I'll be covering the passive, a tricky and complicated topic for sure, but I hope watching this episode and also the passive part 2 will help answer those questions. To help me explain the passive, I'll be using some wonderful facts about Canada. Stop! What's the passive voice again? The passive voice is a sentence structure which we use when we want to highlight the person or thing that experienced an action. Do we know what the passive looks like? Have a look at these sentences. Which one is in the passive voice? A. Someone in Canada invented the Hawaiian pizza. B. The Hawaiian pizza was invented in Canada. I'll give you a hint. Which sentence emphasizes the topic of those two sentences? It's B. B is in the passive voice. It highlights the pizza and puts it as the subject of the sentence. And sentence A is in the active voice. It emphasizes that someone in Canada as the subject. Both convey a similar idea, but in different ways from different perspectives. It's like two sides of a coin. Notice something else that's different? What's that extra verb in sentence B? Yes, the verb to be appears before the past participle invented. That's a clue that's in the passive voice. So how do we form the passive? We're going to transform an active sentence into the passive voice for you. You might want to really pay attention to this demonstration. Get some colored pens and write it down. Here we go. To form the passive, take an active sentence like this and identify the object. Now take that object you want to emphasize and make it the subject of your new passive sentence. Identify the verb tense of the active sentence. Add the verb to be in the same verb tense. Check that your verb to be in the passive sentence agrees with the subject. Take the main verb of that active sentence and conjugate it in its past participle form. Finish your sentence, and only when you want to emphasize who did the action, add the preposition by and the person or thing who performed the verb. Got it? Can we transform any active sentence into a passive sentence? No, we actually can't. The rule is you can only transform an active sentence when there is a transitive verb, a verb that must have a direct object to complete the sentence. So when you see sentences like, Canada has 2 million lakes, or 22.1 million tourists arrive in Canada every year, why can't we transform these verbs into the passive voice? Go back to those sentences again and think about it. What type of verbs did we use? Sentence A has a state verb, and B has an intransitive verb. These types of verbs cannot be transformed into the passive. When should we use the passive? There are some very specific cases when we should use the passive. The first instance I already explained to you. It's when we want to highlight the topic of the sentence. Remember the Hawaiian pizza? Well, here's another example. Superman was also invented here in Canada. Beat that. Sometimes when our sentence starts with a topic and we need to add more details, it means we simply need to use the passive. Basketball is one of my favorite sports because it was invented by a Canadian, Dr. James Naismith, in 1891. When there's a rule we want to emphasize and we want to sound official, use the passive. Picking trillium flowers is forbidden in Canadian parks. Here's a tip. Have a look at all the advertisements in an English magazine and start noticing the passive voice. Ask yourself, why did they use the passive? And then try to transform that passive sentence back into the active voice. Can you do it? And does it sound as effective? Stay tuned for the passive part 2, where you'll get more specific examples of when we use the passive voice in English. Until then, subscribe to Bite Size English, share with your friends, comment below, and see you next time. My first job will always be remembered by me. I will always remember my first job. The first sentence is in the passive voice, and the last one is in the active voice. Grammatically, these sentences are correct, but which sentence seems more natural to write? And when should we use the passive? Hi, I'm Dora, and welcome to another fantastic episode of Bite Size English, your daily bite of English.
What's up, Doc?
Many of you might be thinking you need to know the passive because you're doing a lot of business writing or academic writing. Right. Well, watch our episode for the passive part 1 on how to form it and for some examples of when we use it. In this episode, we will continue with more specific examples of when to use that passive voice. You're responsible for writing about a process related to scientific research, industrial or company operations. Then yes, write in the passive where the people who perform the actions are not the focus. Have a look at this paragraph describing a mining process. Can you find examples of the passive? To separate ore from waste rock, drill samples are sent to a laboratory for analysis. The results are used to mark out zones of ore and waste rock, which are mined separately. You should have found the examples of the verb to be plus a past participle. The 3 examples were are sent, are used, and are mined. Do we know who sent the samples or who reported the samples? No, we don't. But it doesn't matter who did it. We logically assume all those experts behind the process are doing these actions. We don't need to talk about them because we want to focus on the process itself. Writing bad news is never easy. You or your company is rejecting an application. How would you tell the person? We've denied your application. Ouch! Expect to get the hate mail. Here is where the passive voice is useful. When you want to keep it impersonal and no one wants to be personally responsible, you could write, unfortunately, your application has been denied. Need to let someone go? The most aggressive thing you could say or write in the passive is, yeah! I don't think I would ever say to a person, I fire you. That just sounds weird. And listen to what this professor says.
Here we have one of our candidates for president in the United States, New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, who, in explaining how it was that his administration caused a 3-hour traffic jam by deliberately closing the lanes to a tunnel during rush hour in order to punish the mayor of a town that would not endorse his reelection, he said, mistakes were made. The infamous politician's evasive passive.
Think of all the people in power who use the passive to avoid being blamed for mistakes they made. Instead of, I made mistakes, you might hear, mistakes were made. Yeah, right. I think I know who made them. Sometimes the passive isn't necessary. Sometimes it's okay to put in those details that others want to avoid talking about. Here's an example. The computer was inspected and a faulty chip was found. The decision was made to replace the faulty chip and a new manufacturer was engaged. After the new chip was tested, the system failures stopped. Now, think about that writing this in the active voice. The chief engineer inspected the computer and found a faulty chip. The manager in charge of parts decided to replace the faulty chip and engaged a new manufacturer. After the engineering team tested the new chip, the system failure stopped. Now it's clear. Everyone knows who successfully solved the problem and with less words. Yay, team. Let's go back to the sentences I used at the start. My first job will always be remembered by me. I will always remember my first job. Which one was the most natural? The last sentence. The first passive sentence sounds formal, but ridiculously formal. Review now all the reasons to use the passive. From our first episode on passive, we use it when highlighting the topic, writing a rule, being impersonal, making a general statement, and now when writing a process, avoiding responsibility, but use the passive voice wisely. So here's the tip. Many university students and business people use the passive. True, but don't overuse it. You might sound either overly formal, where formality isn't needed. You could sound like you're avoiding the details, when maybe the details are what you do need. And most importantly, you will sound too wordy, when really everyone wants you to be brief. That's all for today. Have any comments? Write them below the video. Like our episode? Then subscribe to our channel. And finally, sharing is caring. Please share it with others. See you next time on Bite Size English. Take a look at these sentences. Pause the video to read through them and tell me, what do these sentences have in common? Many celebrities were born and raised in Canada. It's thought that Hollywood stars like Ryan Reynolds, Rachel McAdams, and Ryan Gosling are American, but they're not. You'll find them at the Toronto International Film Festival, which is said to be the most important film festival in the world. If you want to get starstruck or just get blown away by a great movie, come to Toronto in September. Yes, they're all sentences about celebrities and where to find them. But did you notice something else? Hi, it's me, Dora from Bite Size English, here to give you your daily bite of English. Here are some hints. We did 2 episodes about this topic already. It's a grammar topic, and we use it when we want to emphasize the thing or person who experienced an action. Got it yet? These sentences all have examples of the passive voice. If you've watched the passive part 1 and part 2, then you'd know what to look for. But these sentences introduce you to other forms of the passive. So take out a notebook and pen and let's get started. In the passive part 1 and 2, we looked at a form of the passive that is more commonly identified. Let's have a look again. The formula is subject plus auxiliary verb to be plus main verb in a past participle form plus the complement. Let's look at a sentence. Did you find the passive? Can you identify the subject and the verb in passive? Right, the subject is the songs and the verb in passive is are played. And what about the sentence in our introduction? Can you spot the verb to be plus a past participle passive formula? In that first sentence, we see that auxiliary verb to be and the past participle form of born and raised. Let's look at the second sentence. We have an example of the impersonal passive. What's that, you ask? Look at the start of the sentence. It is thought. This is a general statement of what a group thinks. Notice its construction. We always start these statements with it, then the verb to be, plus the past participle of a reporting verb, plus that. What's a reporting verb? A category of verbs used for when we are saying or thinking something. Say, think, believe, claim, know, consider, presume, hope, state are all examples. Look at the third sentence. We see a similar structure with a difference. We have started the sentence with a specific subject that we have an opinion about. Subject plus verb to be plus past participle of the main verb plus an infinitive. Here are our final forms of the passive. These examples are more informal. Notice we use the verb get. Have a look at the sentence and identify the two forms of the get passive by identifying the parts of speech. We find get starstruck, which is get plus an adjective. Get blown away by, which is get plus a past participle. When do we use the get passive? When we're talking about a change in our state, and it's more appropriate, natural, and less formal than saying, I'm becoming starstruck. We use becoming when talking about changes in state over longer periods of time. I'm slowly becoming an old woman, but even I get nervous when I see a young, hot actor. What's the tip? Practice makes perfect. Start by identifying the passive in what you read. Review the passive episodes on our Bite Size English YouTube channel. Then go to our website, bitesizeenglish.com, and find a worksheet on constructing the passive, so that when you're in need of writing it yourself, you can think back to our episodes and the work you did on those worksheets. That's all for today. Remember, if you have any questions, please write them in our comments section below this video. We love to hear from you. And if you need more help, again, check out our website, bitesizeenglish.com, and consider signing up for lessons with our wonderful teachers. Bye for now.